You guys.
And we are starting this all over again, just to bring everybody in. Sometimes it works better when you push the buttons properly, gang. Welcome to the Friday afternoon happy hour webcast from WhiskyCast.com. Yeah, I thought I pushed the go live button a few seconds earlier too, and guess what? I look up and going, wait a second, no, Facebook's telling me to cut us off. This is what happens when they leave you alone for a couple of weeks at home, and you can start tasting whiskeys earlier than usual. Hint, hint. But, our guests today, Matthew Rowley, Nafeesa Saboor, Ivy Mix, and Prairie Rose, all joining us from parts around the country. Nafeesa's down in New Orleans, where we all would be likely this weekend, because this would have been Tales of the Cocktail weekend. Had it not been postponed and then canceled because of until next year. There will be a virtual Tales in September, but it's not going to quite be the same, is it, guys?
No,
not
really.
No, it might be a little less humid here in San Diego, which I guess is where I'll be during all of that. But no, it's not quite the same as going down and seeing old friends and drinking too much. And warning first-timers, don't have to drink everything that's in front of you, and you certainly don't have to finish it. But they never listen, do they?
Nafeesa, how is it down there since you just moved to New Orleans?
I did. It's rainy right now. It's been really hot. But today I haven't even been outside because it's just poured intermittently. So, and we're expecting that for the next few days.
Oh, lovely. So it probably was a good thing we're all not down there this time around.
Exactly. It would have been galoshes and poncho weather, but too hot for both.
If you have questions or comments for our panel, please feel free to put them in the feedback sections on the platform you're watching us on, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope. If you're watching us on Twitter, I keep reminding everybody about this. Don't reply to the tweet with the video in it, because we won't see that until after the show. But first of all, let's start off with the usual question. What's everybody got in their glasses today? And let's start with you.
Who are we starting with?
You. Your glass.
Well, I'm very boring. I am in Los Angeles, so it's only 2 p.m. and I'm in the middle of writing a book right now, so I have to keep my wits about me. So I have sparkling water and some bitters in my glass, which is very refreshing, but not that exciting.
Ivy, I'm sure you've got something good, because I know you're at your bar Leyenda in Brooklyn. What have you got?
I am. I actually was outside and my internet wasn't working as well. So now I'm inside, and Jesse, my beverage director, is grabbing me a drink. But I'm drinking the Rey Campero Tepestate Mezcal.
It is National Tequila Day, although Mezcal, of course, is not tequila, but it's in the same neighborhood, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And, you know, I do love whiskey, but my heart lies with agave.
And we'll ask you in a few minutes about your new book, The Spirits of Latin America, that you just came up with. Nafeesa, what do you have down in New Orleans?
Right now, it's just an Uncle Nearest 1856. Keeping it pretty simple.
Very nice choice. I've got a bottle of that well within reach here. Pete Head and telling us he has a Kleinleash 14-year-old. Matthew, what do you have?
I'm kind of with Prairie Rose. It's about 2 o'clock here, so I've got a iced tea, but I've got it in a local tiki mug. There's a place called Bali High, and they have this thing they used to have on the roof called the Goof on the Roof. And I don't know if you can see, my husband hates this glass so much that he makes me turn it away from him. He also hates this shirt too, but he doesn't have to see it right now. So I have some whiskeys lined up, though. I've got some Old Forester, and I've got some of, I see you've got some Sagamore Spirit behind you. I've got the Cognac cask finished one here. So
Nice.
that I find is a really lovely rye. So I'm going to be tapping that in a bit.
And for the record, I am drinking the new Prairie Ranch bottled in bond rye from Nevada. And there's actually a story behind this, because as I tweeted out earlier today, my wife, Christina, my business partner, she's driving our youngest daughter out to Los Angeles to start medical school at UCLA. So they're driving out now, and we're in Las Vegas this morning. Christina's in the elevator at their hotel, and she runs into Colby Frey and his wife, Ashley, of Frey Ranch. They're wearing distillery T-shirts, and she goes, "I know who you guys are." And they, okay, we don't know who you are. And she goes, oh yeah, I'm working with Mark. And they go, because Colby had been on the webcast a few weeks ago. So wound up getting the surprise, hey, guess who I'm with? And it's, hey, Mark, it's Colby. Okay, cool. So it worked out well, but just proof that it is a small world out there. So I decided to drink some of the Prairie Ranch rye, which is a 5-year-old bottled in bond rye that I'll have my tasting notes for it on the show this weekend. So got some interesting news today. The first of next year's events to be postponed because of coronavirus. American Distilling Institute is moving its annual convention that was going to be at the end of March in Louisville to next August. They're thinking that we may not be in a position to get through this even by March. So they're just taking a preemptive step now to say, let's just move it to August and be done with it so we don't have to compete for dates next August with anything that happens. Given that we'd all be at Tails this weekend in New Orleans, drinking going through the Pedialyte popsicles in the morning, where do you think we are in terms of getting back to something approximating pre-COVID reality?
I'm not sure we're going to get back to pre-COVID reality. I mean, geopolitically, certainly that's changed. Lots more to consider there. But as far as like meeting up with friends and giving a hug and a slap on the back and here, try my drink, and I want to try what you're doing, that's not happening right now. It's happening with some of my friends. I mean, I see them on Instagram and they're going to pool parties and they're hanging out in Vegas and they're doing things like that. But you know, we've got a COVID situation here in my own house, which is why I'm not in the office today with all those like very cool books behind me. We've divvied up the house and my husband's up in the front part and I'm back here. I can't wait to get back to some kind of social gatherings with friends and colleagues and distillers and bartenders and other writers, but it's not anytime soon. And when I talk to doctors, friends with a lot of physicians, they just shake their head. They say, no, you know, they're horrified that gyms are opening again and that people are gathering. And I think I'd rather take this cautious approach and stay home. I order from my favorite restaurants and the bars that are having pop-ups and takeout and curb service. I'm trying to help, but we're not anywhere near back to normal yet.
Ivy, how are things at Leyenda? I know that we've heard a lot about issues with bars in Brooklyn. And of course, just as I ask the question, the screen goes dark.
It's been, it has been very, sorry, I pressed the thing and it disappeared. It's not good. I mean, everything in New York, everything across the whole world is not good. But I don't know. I don't think that we're going to get back to normal until there's a vaccine. I don't know when there's going to be a vaccine. I'm sitting here in my bar. We don't allow anyone to sit inside. We just opened up, 5 minutes ago. We've got 2 people sitting in our tables outside. We have an outside patio this way. We're one of the lucky ones, though. We're lucky, and every day I talk to other people who are like, we gotta close. I'm actually part of I represent bars on the Independent Restaurant Coalition, the IRC, and I've been doing a lot of work kind of campaigning and contacting Congress and doing all this stuff to try to get a bill passed to save bars and restaurants, because we are the antithesis to COVID is hugging friends, slapping bags, like giving hugs, sharing glasses, and that's not going to happen for a long time. And I agree, if it ever happens again, I think people will have fear for a long, long time. But I have faith that we are human beings, that
And the image has frozen again. So while we're waiting for her to come back, Nafeesa, I know that things opened up briefly in Louisiana right about the time you got down there, but they're being shut back down again.
Yeah, I actually haven't been to any place in some weeks, but I do know that there are places that most places are open for delivery. There is outside seating in a lot of places. But the indoor, statewide, they restricted on-premise consumption indoors. At least that's the last I saw. So, it's kind of weird because the whole economy here is based on service industry and hospitality and people coming to have fun and party and drink and go out to eat. So without that, it's pretty quiet. Like I live on a route that would normally be a block away from the second lines, and of course that's on freeze. And so, you can order, like I order from an app to get my alcohol delivered. But what I am noticing is that we're doing a lot more of order from an app and have like 3 to 5 people. I have a big porch, so we porch drink. So we order alcohol over and 5 of us will sit on the porch and like either drink something straight or have cocktails. And I think I could see there becoming more of a trend of people having a small gathering of people they trust, maybe people they've kind of clustered with. I call it quarantine clusters. And we're going to have this bartender come over, make us drinks, have maybe a chef fix us dinner, and we'll, chip in the amount that we probably would have spent on a night out and have it more intimate, still have the music, still have the fun, but feel a little less scared.
Ivy, welcome back. Please finish what you were saying. We keep seeing all the video out of New York with people hanging around outside of bars, and Governor Cuomo going just absolutely stark raving nuts about all this, and the controversy over Cuomo chips and all that. How hard has it been for you to keep people in line at your place?
But it has not been that hard for me, to be honest with you. We have really great clientele. To be perfectly honest, the instruction from everywhere from federal to state to city level has been so botched that it's really hard to follow any rules because no one knows what the rules are. Cuomo and de Blasio keep on fighting. That's a big problem. Trump is like just incompetent and can't figure that shit out either. Sorry, I swear. Sorry, it's bartender.
You can say Trump here. That's okay.
You're not on broadcast. It's fine. Go for it.
Bartender on the loose swears. But yeah, it's been really tricky. I have found that my clientele, the people who are here and coming to the bar, are for the most part, I would say 85% respectable. Now that we're able to open up in our dine out seating, we have less congregating illegally because we're able to seat people socially distanced. So that's been easier. But you do have the bad actors, the bad players, the people who are jerks. But for the most part, it's been okay.
Prairie, how about Los Angeles? You guys have cases spiking just as my kid is coming out there.
I know, it's really horrible, and we were doing so well, and I really thought that we were on the right track, and started opening things up way too soon, and then we saw spikes after that. So I think what happened is, Governor Newsom's he's come out and said we were definitely premature in opening things up, and I think that the hardest thing is that disconnect between the city, state, nationwide, government. Like that's why this country can't get its shit together, because it feels the states' rights are, it doesn't make any sense. We're not, galvanizing our entire country to kind of follow. We have no leadership right now. So, but I'm finding in LA, everyone I know in hospitality is continuing to do to-go cocktails if they can. But not doing a lot of socializing. I think people are pretty conservative. The people that I know are very conservative in terms of getting together and socializing. So I'm hoping we can level that curve. So your kid's going to be safe, Mark.
I hope so.
Yeah.
And Ivy has something in her hands. I think this is a subtle. She wants us to talk about her
It
book.
was just falling down. I honestly didn't mean to do that. I was like,
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Go ahead. Let's talk about your new book, Spirits of Latin America, because
oh, now I'm like,
National Tequila Day. So let's talk about it. This is your first book, if I'm not mistaken, right?
it is my first book. Now I'm like, you can't see it over the internet, but I'm probably blushing like crazy. That wasn't. Yeah, it's my first book. I think writing a book is kind of like opening a bars. Like after you do it, you're like, I'm never doing that shit ever again. So perhaps my only book. I'm not sure. But yeah, it's my baby, Spirits of Latin America, in which we talk about whiskey a little. Yeah, there it is. We talk about some of the Latin American whiskeys out there in the book. And it came out May 26th in a very, very interesting time to have a book come out. Book tour was canceled, press was canceled, everything was went away. But we've still had some success. It's been really awesome. We're selling at Leyenda. Every night someone comes in like, can you?
And the picture froze again. It's raining in the Northeast, and the rain does stuff to internet connections, as we keep finding out right now. But I'm just chuckling at her comments about the being hard to write that first book in a room full of writers here on this show. Because none of you have any sympathy on this one, right?
Yeah.
I do.
No. Do you?
I do.
Oh. Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Yeah.
It's agonizing, right? It's natural, but it can be an agonizing process sometimes. So
this was
Most
when,
I was trying to be nice, but all the time.
all the time. Yeah, I was done with the last book before I was actually finished with it. I was my publisher had asked for 50,000 words, and right around 180,000 words. I was like, I don't know what this book is about anymore. Let me go back to the proposal. What is this about? Oh, okay. I cut out everything that wasn't that, and I cut out a book's worth of material, which I'm thinking I need to repurpose into something else, but not just yet. You're back.
Yeah.
Well, we were talking amongst ourselves, Ivy, while you were reconnecting in. So tell us more about the book.
Now we can't hear you, Ivy.
We can't hear you.
No, at all.
Okay, so let's just keep going while she's connecting it here. Prairie, tell us about the book you're working on.
Oh yeah, sure.
That's what the plug's important now.
Sure. Yeah, I'm on my last 3 chapters, which is like, I feel like I relate to that, Matthew, about like being over it before you're done with it, and I feel like it's been a painful process, but then sort of natural. You know, I have pretty aggressive deadlines, and so but the book I'm writing is about modern cocktails, so it's a really broad spectrum, and I've had to kind of define that for myself. What does that mean? What is a modern cocktail? And so that's been actually fun to kind of like realize, just create a definition for that, and include things that are within the scope of that. I actually have an Ivy Mix original cocktail I'm featuring in there. She just disappeared, but it's her agave take on a Mai Tai, which is such a great cocktail and really popular at Leyenda, and a lot of modern classics are in there. So yeah, but hopefully I'll be done in a few weeks, and I won't be editing too much after that. But the pub date's January. Hopefully we'll be on the other side of COVID by then. I don't know. I don't even know how to predict these things, or, I know a number of people that had books that came out in the last 3 months, and it's such a weird time for people. Ivy's really lucky that she has a platform, a bar that she can sell from too. I think she's such a great face for her own bar and brand and book. And but a lot of writers that I know don't have that, and it's been really hard for them, with everything canceled, doing everything online when everyone else is doing everything online. It's hard to promote.
Well, you know what? Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, for my bill paying job is kind of branding and like social and those kinds of things. And I'm like, one of the things that I've learned is like when people want something, they go where they can find the information in kind of like an amalgamated way, like not amalgamated, like a collective way. So like if I wanted, like I just moved, so I'm thinking coffee table books. I'm thinking books that I want to be positioned prominently for the aesthetic, but also for the usefulness, right? Because we're all at home. Everybody's tired of just throwing some soda and some whiskey. So what else can I do? And this is the time when people have nothing but time on their hands to sit and read books. So it's kind of like, all right, let's say you have 5 people right here who are writers who write about whiskey, write about alcohol or cocktails and work in the industry. It's kind of like, what if you, kind of buddied up with a few of them and was like, here's an e-copy of my book. Do you mind sharing some images, or do you mind sharing some thoughts? It doesn't cost you much, but maybe it would be a way to get the word out there a little better, because right, the marketplace is crowded, everyone's online. But if you have a few voices that people trust and maybe that personally, so you're not coming out of a PR budget, you could kind of do it grassroots. And word of mouth right now is such a big thing because everybody's on Zoom calls with their friends. Everybody is spending a lot more time just talking on the phone. And I think, we maybe go back to a little bit of the basics that we had before there were so many booze publications. People were just talking to each other. And I think, that could be a way you kind of utilize your platform to get the book out. Because now I'm interested. I didn't necessarily know these 2 books were coming out. I didn't get email pitches, but I'm like, ooh, I want to know. I want to see, what did you say? Latin American whiskeys. So I think it's just a matter of like, casting down your bucket into your pool of people.
Well, I think in some ways it's kind of like there's been this trend in publishing for so many years where you're not necessarily doing big book tours, nationwide book tours, and a lot of the responsibility for marketing, promoting books, getting it placed in newspapers and magazines has fallen on the authors. Increasingly, as publishing staff get smaller and smaller, and they have to do more. That if you want to write a book about something, one of the first questions is, okay, what are your platforms? How many Twitter followers do you have? Well, what's your presence on Instagram? And there's a lot of that's just sort of expected of us anyway, which is fine. We should be promoting our own materials, but this is almost like kicking a kid in the deep end of the pool. Like, okay, now you have to. Now your book, you cannot. I really liked several years ago, Paul Clark, when he came out with the Cocktail Chronicles, had a deal where for $50 you go to a bar and you'd get a signed copy of his book, and he would do his little dog and pony show, and he'd talk about some cocktails. You'd get maybe 2 or 3 drinks and a signed copy of his book. And I thought that was really interesting because a lot of the writers I know go to bookstores. Like, well, if you're selling a book about drinks, why don't you go where the drinkers are? Go to a bar. Maybe they've been liquored up a little bit and their resistance to parting with their money is a little lower too. So yeah, this is where we get creative. It's been kind of heartbreaking to see the number of authors, particularly first-time authors, the last few months, excitedly coming out with a book, and everything they're used to, except for sort of online presence, has been canceled. You can't do it. But the another side of that, I think, as drink writers, there's a book that I've been wanting to do for a while, but it entails road trips. All my books entail going out into the field and going to big distilleries and little tiny ones where you have to ford the little creek and up the gravel road, and there is no GPS, so you better have a map because your phone won't work out there. I fear whether a lot of these distilleries will be in business next year. I saw a survey from, I think it was Discus about a month ago, and something like 60% of American small distilleries had some kind of compromised future. Not just sales are down because of tariffs, but really existential worry. whether
Yeah.
they can afford to do this.
9 out of 10 distilleries, almost all the small ones and even some of the bigger ones, make most of their revenue off of their tasting rooms.
Yeah.
When the
Yeah.
tasting rooms are closed, so yeah, there's a good chance we may lose a lot of them
Yeah.
next 6 months or so.
Yeah.
Are you with us
Yeah.
now?
Huge.
I'm here. I'm trying on my office computer. I'm so like beyond horrified that I'm having such technological difficulties.
Well, I was
So,
wondering if this
so is
question-
my life.
I was waiting to bring in this question until you got back with us. Chris Ratcliffe wants to know, if we're in a cocktail mood, for the entire panel here, what are your go-to whiskey cocktails, and are there cocktails that you'd recommend of your own invention or lesser-known ones that should be celebrated more? I have to admit, this is my weak spot because my favorite cocktail is whiskey and 5 drops of water. Sorry, that's just the way I like my whiskey. But I'm sure that the 4 of you can recommend some pretty good ideas between you.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite whiskey cocktail is probably the Bensonhurst. It's one of the many, many riffs on a Manhattan. So it's rye whiskey, 2 ounces of rye. Well, I do mine with 2 ounces. You can do it with 1.5 ounces, but I like more whiskey in my cocktails. So 1.5 or 2 ounces of rye whiskey, 3/4 of an ounce dry vermouth, 1/2 ounce of Cynar, and 1/4 ounce, or depending, or a teaspoon of maraschino, Luxardo maraschino. You stir that up and you serve it up with a lemon twist. It's another riff on a Manhattan, and it's delicious. So a little bit bitter, a little bit, floral, and it's got rye whiskey, which if I'm gonna drink whiskey, it's my fave.
Yeah. And the rye and the Cynar together is a nice combination too. Yeah, well done.
It's a little bit aggressive, but in the light, this dry vermouth and the Luxardo kind of lighten it up a little bit. So it's a really nice play. Manhattan is the father, then you got the Brooklyn, and this is kind of playing on Brooklyn. So it's really good.
Teresa, how about you?
So I'm more of I think my favorite cocktail is just like whiskey and a glass. But one of the things I do like to do is in the summer, I like to play around with sangrias. So a few years ago, I did a Rye and Rose Sangria. And that has been like, if I want to drink whiskey with something, especially here in this heat and humidity, then I'll do this like Rose and Rye Sangria. And I don't have a big recipe for it. It's kind of one of those things like you pour, as we like to say, you pour until the ancestors tell you to stop. And you smell it and you taste it a little bit and you add some mango and some peach and you play around with some bitters and then you sit on the porch with some ice and you drink.
Prairie?
Nice. This is such a hard one because I love so many different whiskey cocktails. I would have to say, if I am going to go for like a sour, like a whiskey sour, it's always a penicillin. Like penicillin, hands down. That combination of the honey ginger with lemon and a little scotch, a little of that like sweety float on top is just perfection. I think that's such a perfect cocktail. I love, there's an original cocktail that I'm including in my book that is it's like an equal parts like a Boulevardier or Negroni called Amore Mio, and that's with equal parts whiskey, coffee liqueur, and Aperol. And it's really simple, and I love coffee and whiskey together. That's one of my favorite combos. I love like a coffee old fashioned, a little twist of orange. So yeah, those are my picks.
Nafeesa, Chris Ratcliffe loves that idea for your sangria. You need to come up with a wow.
Maybe I do need to like put that out. I posted it somewhere like years ago, but I'm gonna have to dig it out and put it there.
It made me think immediately of what's that place in Bywater? Is it Bacchanal? Like way down at the ends where the outdoor place.
Wine.
They had laid in a big supply of rosé, one tails of the cocktail, and we just decimated all of it. There were no bottles to be had left, but I'm thinking the rosé and rye is a really nice combination that, I would like to play with. We happen to have I haven't been liquor shopping in about 4 months, but we still have hundreds of bottles around the house, and a good deal of rye too. So I think I'm gonna
They
try
play
this.
well together. It's kind of like you get that like sweetness and like a little earthiness, and then the rosés tend to be kind of floral, fruity.
Oh yeah,
and it
no, I
just
got
gives
you.
this.
Yeah.
It's just really fresh, and it's got the gravity because it's whiskey, but then it's got such lightness. So it makes it fun.
Bourbon and Lambrusco, that'd be my thing.
I would love that. You know what? I'm always telling people that like you should play around with things that seem like that are unlikely pairings. Like I'm like, how come you guys doing a like you find very few red sangrias that have like hibiscus or sorrel in them, and I'm like, oh, I'd love like something with some sorrel and some whiskey and the red
nice
wine.
sour, yeah.
Yeah. So like
good.
I don't think people play as much with those things when I'm going out to bars as I would like them to.
Well, I think that's really funny that you bring that up, because at Leyenda, and it seems like I finally have my internet is finally here. I'm so sorry, everyone. But at Leyenda, we're constantly trying to blend kind of Latin American or Caribbean flavors with other types of spirits. So like your first instinct might not be, oh, sorrel, hibiscus, and whiskey. But really, they go really well together. Like people are like, oh, American whiskey, American flavors. But that doesn't necessarily have to be that way. I love that you say that, and also the idea of like splitting bases in your cocktails. So you don't have to do just a whiskey cocktail. You can do like whiskey and rum, whiskey and cognac. Like look at the Vieux Carré. American.
It would be interesting to see you play with some mezcal.
We have done.
In something that's kind of in the sangria family or whatever. I just think that like it gets kind of endless.
If I can interrupt for just a second, Matthew, if you can move your microphone boom just a little bit away from your mouth. The boom just a little further away because you were breathing into it and we were picking up your breathing.
No, I was trying to do that. That's some heirloom vintage breathing techniques that I'm trying out, and I just need to spread that. It's sort of a Southern California thing. It's sort of calming. Okay. Yeah, I got it. Never mind. How we doing?
Because it was hard to hear everybody else occasionally, so I just wanted to jump in, and I hate to do that to you, but
no. I didn't pick that up myself. I was so excited about all this talk of blending whiskey and wine. We don't do that a lot to blend whiskey with other with wines. I mean, maybe a New York sour, which is lovely, where you get a float of red wine on top of a whiskey sour. But yeah, I'm sorry. I was just so excited. I was apparently breathing heavily.
So this is a drink in my book. Woo, let me see.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, this is a drink called the oh my God, everything's backwards. The Pan Am Sour. Oh God.
Okay.
And it's a riff on a New York sour. It's one of my favorite drinks of all time, which also happens to be one of Dave Wondrich's favorite drinks. So when I used to work at Clover Club across the street, Dave would come in and order New York sours. And then when I opened up Leyenda, he came in, he was like, I don't know, make me something. And I was like, oh shit, what am I gonna make Dave that's like a New York sour? So I did the kind of a New York sour variation, but with cachaça. And now it's a staple at Leyenda. It's in the book. So, and he named it the Pan Am Sour. He's like, Pan-American. And I was like, I love it.
Great question here from Chris Ratcliffe. For cocktails, are whiskeys designed for mixing a good thing? Or if you won't drink it straight, you shouldn't put it in a cocktail? There are clearly some whiskeys that are designed for mixing. Monkey Shoulder, I think, comes to mind for a lot of bartenders. But what's the philosophy here? Are there good mixing whiskeys and then good sipping whiskeys, or should they both be able to meet both needs?
There's mixing whiskeys and sipping whiskeys. There's spitting whiskeys, that are good for nothing more than spitting in the bonfire and watching it kind of explode. I tend to follow that deal. I don't have many whiskeys around that I wouldn't drink straight. We were talking about our go-to whiskey cocktails, and I think in some ways American beverage arts, if we want to call it that, have hit a high watermark about like the crazy 10 ingredient cocktails with, it's a half an ounce of chamomile infused rye, and it's this lavender sea salt gastrique, and like, people don't drink like that at home usually. I know a few people who drink like that at home, but that's not good. And I think my own, I still do sort of Baroque complex cocktails at home, but my go-to cocktail is that split base that you were talking about, Ivy. I've got some Old Forester, and I do a float of the Laird's 7.5-year-old brandy. So mine is bourbon and with an apple brandy float. And the bourbon changes and the apple brandy changes. Sometimes I'll do Calvados. But it's just easy. You put it together in 15 seconds. You get that nice sort of fruitiness of the apple on there. Not a whole lot, but especially lately when the days have been rough, that feels like a very easy go-to kind of cocktail. But as far as whiskeys that are for mixing and some for drinking, I totally get the idea that a distiller will work on creating a whiskey from the grain to the barrel and the aging and maybe secondary barrels and shifting around in the warehouse, and the idea that that whiskey might be absolute perfection in a bottle, and you don't want to mix it with anything. No, drink the whiskey, sip it. Maybe ice or a few drops of water, but that's it. On the other hand, I come at drinks from a food background, and why wouldn't you want to use the best ingredients possible? Is it a waste to spend that special bourbon on a Manhattan? Maybe. It depends on how old the vermouth is and your taste like that, but why not have a really good Manhattan? And I've discovered that with all the bottles I used to have, we've spent the last 5 years kind of drinking down the liquor cabinets, and we're down to about 600 bottles now because I saved so many for special occasions, and I realized at one point, I'm not going to go to enough weddings and funerals and commencements and like that and birthdays to get through all these special bottles, so I might as well just drink them and share them. And so, yeah, some of them end up in cocktails.
Our audience out on the web has just been very harshly treating Hague Club. The comments I've been posting or showing on the screen here. And Billy Abbott points out that it has introduced more people to whiskey in the past few years than any other, at least in the UK, since not everyone knows David Beckham. But any thoughts on Hague Club among the panel here?
Haven't had it. I'll be honest.
Yeah, I haven't had it either.
I haven't either.
There's this great line from the Stoic philosopher Epictetus, which I bust out from time to time and vary it depending on the circumstances. I know too little to be of assistance. So, yeah, I'm with everyone else. Don't know enough about it to have an opinion on that one.
I've had it. It's not bad, but it's not the best Cameron Bridge single grain they could have bottled. I love single grain whiskeys, especially in the summertime. Even those are the ones I'd put a couple of ice cubes in on a hot day with a single grain because they're not as heavy as a malt or a bourbon, but you still get that they have all the taste and the lightness to them with a couple of cubes of ice. And I would do that in a summer day. That's one of the few things that I would put ice into a whiskey for. But yeah, they could have been so much better. Same thing with Proper 12 in the Irish whiskey side. It could have been so much better than what they came out with. We do have a question here, also on the cocktail front. I'm just trying to scroll up to find it. Is there an ingredient that people should have on their cocktail counter at home or at their bar that is very underrated? Just down the comment here, that more people should have. Is there a cocktail ingredient that is underrated?
Yeah, American apple brandy. That's one of my. It's been one of my go-to favorites for 25 years. I've had the illicit stuff from the Ozarks. I've had raw and white from New Jersey. I've had really done in very different styles. It's a complex, multifaceted spirit, and I think it pairs well with whiskey, especially if you're doing something simple like this thing that I just did with just a float of apple brandy on it. Or if you're doing some sort of split-based cocktail, an old-fashioned or whatever. I was going to say bitters as the must-have ingredient, the Angostura bitters, or Peychaud's if you want, but underrated was the key there. Everyone knows about bitters. Not everyone appreciates apple brandy, and that's one of my big, hands-down favorites.
I saw some comments about Chinar after Ivy had mentioned Chinar, and I think, bitter Italian Amaros in general go so beautifully with whiskey that exploring that, and that's a huge category. And like Chinar is so very different than Maletti, for instance. But Maletti, speaking of Maletti, I think that is such a workhorse Amaro that is a beautiful modifier for whiskey cocktails, and even in like a base Amaro and whiskey, I've played with a lot. So I would have to say Amaro, Maletti, maybe, and Chinar. I love Chinar.
I would say, sorry.
So for me, I'm a person, like, I kind of like to just have my whiskey and like some weird garnish that goes in the glass. So I've been a fan lately, especially with smoky things, of dried apricot.
Yum.
And so, like, I like to play with dried apricot, like in whiskeys, but also in mezcals. I just always get, can I have this and then a piece of dried apricot? And when I can't get the piece of dried apricot, I'm a little disappointed. So I think like dried fruits, keeping dried fruits at home and being able to play with those is kind of a cool thing. And I think it's underrated. And they keep so well that it's one of those things that you can keep on hand and have it for a while without worrying about wasting it. And then my other thing is, like I said before, the hibiscus. Playing around with whiskey and hibiscus is a really cool thing, and finding your balance of, what you like. I remember when Jackie was doing the Sorrel, and
exactly. I want to bring that up.
I used to love playing with that, and just different, I took some friends through tasting Sorrel. Like, I was introducing them to it, and I was like, okay, taste it with this whiskey, taste it with like a regular whiskey, taste it with bourbon, taste it with tequila, taste it with this. And it was like, wow, never would have thought of putting these two things together. But so I think those kinds of things are underrated, and most people don't even think about them.
Yeah. The cool thing about stone fruits and like dried fruits, they're actually really great for infusing spirits with as well. Right. So try that. I mean, it's really, I love an apricot infused mezcal. I've never done it with whiskey, but so frequently mezcal has a stone fruitiness to it, like kind of overripe, borderline rotten stone fruit. So if you put some dried fruit in there, it really kind of raises the flavor profile, which is fun. But I love fortified wine. Like, I've never met a fortified wine I don't like. So I think that people need to have more sherry around. I think people need to have Pinot de Charentais. I think that people need to have, like, there's the Barcel Pisco guys made Perfecto Amor, which is their fortified wine. There's, Pommeau. There's what you would like with your love of Laird's. Brandy. I drink it neat. I drink it in cocktails. The Manhattan is the perfect diagram of a cocktail, I think. And you can plug and play, like vermouth sub X fortified wine, whiskey sub X spirit. So the more fortified wines you have, the better. And the real beauty is that you gotta drink them. So
the refrigerator.
Please put them in the refrigerator. There's nothing worse than hot vermouth. Vermouth got a bad rap because it went hot, and it went bad because it's wine, people. So, but yeah, drink more fortified wine. It's delicious stuff. And we're all geeks here. That's why we're on this we're on this cast. But fortified wine is like a whole nother level of geekery. Sherry, holy moly! There's so much geekery in sherry.
Yeah, actually, we're starting to see a lot more of the Spanish sherries in the U.S. market, which are not the Spanish vermouth, sorry, based on sherry, which I find really interesting. We've been using those a lot at home, and I don't generally drink vermouth just as is, but sometimes that iced with an orange peel is a really lovely That's
get yourself some Blanc vermouth and infuse it with apricots and put club soda over it, and it's like, it's so
good drink.
So I agree about the dried fruits. I think that Nafeesa, that's a fantastic idea. I was thinking though of Rock and Rye I made a few years ago, and I used dried sour cherries with it. It's dried cherry and Rock and Rye is beautiful. But the first batch I made, I'd gotten some, Kirkland brand Costco dried cherries, and they look so lush and glistening and beautiful and plump in the bag, and that's because they're coated in oil. So when I, started looking at the bottle, I'm like, what is that? There's a little sheen on the top. So make sure you don't get the oily dried
It
fruit.
looked like Prince
Otherwise-
William Sound after the Exxon Valdez when you got that bag.
Yeah. Tastes good, but there's a chef trick they do for defatting consomme, and so I put it in a bowl and put a kitchen towel, a paper towel on it very quickly, and then just whip that off, and that takes away most of the fat. It's just a quick little kitchen trick.
Well, here's Matthew and I were talking before we got started. A lot of folks are doing a lot of gardening.
Yeah.
We have nothing better to do in our yards right now with everybody working from home. And a lot of people with backyards or even little small plots or these community gardens or whatever. We got a lot of fruits, vegetables. I'm looking out in the backyard and I've got my daughter's vegetable garden has cucumbers, green peppers, jalapenos, a whole bunch of different herbs, strawberries, and zucchini and stuff like that. And I'm going, okay, they're gone for 2 weeks. I got to pick this stuff and do something with it. Give me some ideas. How can I mix this stuff with booze and make a cocktail?
Well, the strawberries are your easiest, I would think, right? Like start with those.
I got that. That's ice cream.
Yeah.
I can do that.
Yeah. Okay.
That's ice cream, and that's also tequila too. That you were talking about some Jose Cuervo tequila that maybe is, maybe not the best, maybe not the worst, but wash, hull, and slice strawberries, and what is that old Charles H. Baker something por mi amor? Ivy, you may know this one. Anyway, it's strawberry infused tequila, which makes delicious palomas, and you can put it in sangrias, and it's a solid. And if you want to, do one batch of strawberries, and when they go all pale and albino looking, strain those out, throw in another batch of strawberries too, to give it a little backbone to it. That's a nice thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think the weirdest one is zucchini. Like, God knows what the hell you're going to do with that. I would just say roast it and eat it. But, the easiest one is also, like, people think that, jalapenos or any sort of pepper should just go into tequila. And that's not necessarily the case. People also think that you have to do an infusion, and that's not necessarily the case. I really like making chili syrups. So basically, this drink here, it's really weird having it be like anti. So this is a drink in the book, and it's called the Pancho Perico by our old head bartender Shannon Ponchi, and she made a poblano chili syrup. So how you just get a juice extractor, you take the stem off because the stem is going to be woody and bad. Right. But you wash the chilies, and you put the whole thing through the extractor. So the inside of the chili is actually what makes it spicy. So you get it all out, you get all of this juice, and you do 2 parts juice to 1 part sugar, and all of a sudden you have this really unique tasting, peppery, vegetal, and slightly spicy syrup that will keep in your refrigerator for 3 weeks, a month, and you can make just that and some citrus and some whiskey or some whatever. Like the drink I just showed you was a Pancho Perico, has rum agricole and also Elijah Craig bourbon in it. But you can do whatever you want. You can make a simple sour and really do something interesting with that syrup. So try it with zucchini. It'll probably be really weird, but
Or at least you can use the zucchini as a garnish.
There you go.
Yeah.
Hollow it out and
Bloody Mary for crying out loud.
I was about to say put it in a bloody. Yeah.
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 Any thoughts, Prairie?
I mean, I'm in agreement with Ivy in that, the simplest way to sort of like infuse your drink with vegetables and peppers and fruit is making a simple syrup. And, cucumber is really fun to play with. I haven't done that a lot with whiskey cocktails, but I would say making simple syrups is probably the easiest way to kind of get it in there.
Well, and one of the advantages of doing syrups over, say, an infusion is also kind of pragmatic in that, if you make a syrup that is, it's good, but it fades quickly, or it's not quite what you wanted, and tinking around with it with additional ingredients doesn't help make it better. It's not the end of the world if you dump it down the sink. But if you've spent $25, $30, $40 on a bottle of spirits that you do an infusion for, and it's not quite what you want. That hurts a little to throw that one down the sink. What I did find is that when the bacon fat washed, the Benton's old fashioned was so popular. I think it was Don Lee's drink years ago. My husband was like, "Let's do that." I'm like, I like Benton's bacon. I like Alan Benton. I like bourbon. I don't like these flavors together. He's like, no, let's do that. I'm like, okay, I did it. So we made it, and that particular bottle, based on his facial expression, I just made a label and I put Tim's Bourbon on it. Like, I'm not touching that. What I found is that over time, that bacon, that smokiness sort of went down until it was decent enough to mix into. I think I did a whiskey punch, and that it was okay in that. But the syrups are sort of economical way to get those garden flavors in without actually using a whole bottle of liquor.
Mm-hmm.
Billy Abbott, our pal in London, says he was going to go to bed, but now he needs a Manhattan with some Knob Creek rye and Coachie Bermuda. Now, I got an idea here. I had a little brainstorm when you mentioned poblano peppers. What about taking some poblano peppers whole, maybe slice them down the middle, put them in a bowl or say like a Tupperware container with either a really intense bourbon or a really smoky Islay whiskey, and letting them sit for a while, letting them sit all day, and then putting them on the grill.
Oh, wow.
Good and drunk, and then put those on the grill and then serve them up as a garnish, say on like some pasta or something like that.
I don't know how much peppers actually absorb because they're already so waterlocked. So I don't know how much they actually absorb whiskey, but you could try, or you could kind of slice them up or just kind of flambe them, like get a pan real hot and then you might get a little bit more of that flavor in there. Mm-hmm. Sorry, my dog is like, she's like, why are we in the office?
It's okay. We're dog friendly around here. What's her name?
Her name's Rhea. Say hi, Rhea.
Puppy.
Giving her a bath. She's bored.
We know that some bars have been doing the cocktails to go thing, and it's become more popular now to do these aged cocktails, or the stuff that's sold ready-made to take home and mix it with your own spirits at home. Any thoughts on those, where the bartenders are doing the aged cocktails and then like the barrel-aged gins and things like that in-house?
A little more leery of the barrel-aged gins done in-house. There are distillers who are doing barrel-aged. Actually, I think TTB said that you can't have an age statement on gin, so they're like, barreled or barrel-rested. There are a few that slipped through early on, which were called barrel-aged. That's something distillers can do pretty well. But as far as aged cocktails, it sort of depends on the cocktail and the bartender. There are some bartenders who I would absolutely trust without ever having tasted it. I said, give me one of those. I'll take that, Jeff Morgenthaler. What are you making?
Exactly. It's Jeffrey, and if it's not Jeffrey, nah.
Yeah.
It might be good. I'm always willing to be surprised, but
when it first came out as like a trend, and when Jeffrey Morgenthaler was first, dreaming it up, it was very exciting. There was something really fun and kind of sexy about a barrel-aged cocktail, and I remember going to some seminar on it with David Wondrich years ago when it was first kind of like being talked about, and we tried, a freshly made Manhattan and then a barrel aged Manhattan, and it was like good. I mean, it was, it does change over time. I would probably prefer a fresh.
Yeah, I'm the same. A Manhattan mixed à la minute. Right there in front of you, or you're doing the mixing yourself, is fine. But that drink is not stable over time, and it may improve or it may not. Or what had been a perfectly balanced whiskey cocktail 6 months later is no longer. It's thin. It doesn't have the mouthfeel like that. Sort of like the difference. Well, maybe it's a stretch between white whiskey meant to be consumed as white whiskey versus white whiskey meant to be aged in barrels. They're not. You sort of want to create a flawed spirit almost, because you know what's going to happen to it in the barrel. I think a lot of the bartenders who are doing these in-house are doing them as experiments and don't necessarily have the background and the deep pool of knowledge that the distillers may have about, I know exactly how I think this is going to change, versus a bartender who might be saying, let's just age it because that's the cool thing that the kids are all screaming for these days.
Yeah.
The kids.
Do bartenders have any blame that should be taken or shared for the amount of these white whiskeys that moonshines or whatever you want to call them that distilleries started releasing that were unaged whiskey just because somebody thought these would be good in cocktails?
I think White Dog is just the grossest thing on the whole planet. I think it's so gross. Like, put that thing in some wood ASAP. It's no bueno. In my opinion. And maybe I'm but yeah, I can't stand it. And people are like, look, but it comes in this cute little bottle. Make some cocktails with it. And I'm like, not a chance. I can't put lipstick on a pig. I'm sorry. No way.
Yeah, I spent many years traveling around the United States and into Ireland and Germany, meeting with illicit distillers and those who are making their own white whiskeys and white brandies and aged things and things flavored with peach bunkers and all sorts of. There's a well-known moonshiner in Maggie Valley, North Carolina, or near there, who may have a white whiskey brand out now, known for his moonshine, but for special customers, you got the peach or the apple brandy. Well, I was in a homebrew shop in Asheville, North Carolina one time, and they had several gallon jugs of peach and apple flavoring. And like, that's odd. It's supposed to be a homebrew shop. I'm like, who's that for? I'm like, oh, that's popcorns. Like, okay. There are some good white whiskeys. If you can appreciate them as that and not as failed whiskeys. I sent a mixed case of white whiskeys to Jeff Berry in New Orleans. He did Latitude 29 and Beach Bum Berry, his various cocktail books, which are he's really an outstanding historian, as well as just a sort of tiki enthusiast. And whiskey drinkers, including myself, are kind of loath to mix whiskeys in the glass, but the tiki crowd has no problem putting 2 or 3 or 4 different rums if it builds the taste that they want. And so I sent him this mixed case of white whiskeys and said, Jeff, can you do anything with this? Can you do like a split base? Is there anything sort of tiki applications or tropical drinks? And he came back with some interesting things. He said some made good drinks, none were better than their versions, but I liked pairing some aged and unaged expressions of the same kinds of whiskey, like some of the rum drinks are. So you might get, a 5-year-old rye whiskey and a 6-month, or an older white rye whiskey that just had been aged, in stainless, so it was sort of smoothed out. Interesting, not necessarily better, but not horrible. But I agree, Ivy. Most of that is such. These make-believe moonshines. I've had good moonshine. I've had horrible moonshine. None of the ones that purport to be moonshine, commercial moonshine, I think are better than properly aged whiskeys. So, there, my 2 cents.
I agree.
And Chris Ratcliffe points out, thanks to Discovery Channel, there's a whole lot of folks who know about Popcorn Sutton and Tim Smith. Yeah, blame Discovery Channel for that just as much too.
Yeah, I was talking with Max Wattman some years ago when that Moonshiner show was coming out, and Max also has a book on moonshine, and we've done some talking, and they're Chasing the White Dog. That was the first modern book on moonshine I read where I recognized the scene that I knew. When I read that, I realized Max has actually gone out in the field and he's done the work, because a lot of what you read about moonshine is just not It's second and third hand, and it's not written by distillers. It's written by people who hang out with the distillers. But we were both a little miffed. Like, God, there's a whole show on moonshine, and they haven't asked either one of us to be a talking head on this. And then I saw the show. I'm like, oh, yeah. That's why they don't want real. You
wrote a book about moonshine too. Let's just remind everybody of that one back in 2013, right?
2007. Yeah, this is well before it was good timing. Yeah, on that. But that was an easier book to write. That only took me 5 years.
Wow.
And most of that was getting the good old boys to talk to you, right?
I had some death threats. That's true. Early on, yeah, it was a little difficult to get people to talk to me. But once word sort of started going around, because they often talk to each other, it became easier to contact people. But after I was getting death threats for asking the wrong questions, I got accused of being a Yankee one time. I decided I wasn't going to approach illicit distillers without an introduction. So that's been nice. And the last decade or so, it's been better that people are approaching me. Distillers are sending bottles and cans and try this, and that's been better. Yeah.
Good question here from Sergio Floridis, our buddy at the Irish Whiskey Magazine. Is there an additive or an ingredient that tastes awful by itself, but when added to whiskey comes to life? And I think he meant to type other than bitters, but kind of cut it short there.
Creosote? No, I'm joking.
I'm a huge fan of using coconut water as a mixer in general. And I know a lot of people hate the taste of coconut water. But as a mixer, it's really kind of revelatory. And the very first time I tried it, Jim Meehan had been mixing cocktails with rum and used coconut water and lime and like a ginger liqueur, and it was so fresh, so beautiful. And then I tried it with whiskey, and I have a cocktail with whiskey and Amaro and coconut water and a little maple syrup that's so delightful that I think people can explore that and may not like it on its own.
Anyone else?
I mean, I think it depends on who you are and what your taste buds are like, but some people hate Fernet. They just can't stand it. I personally like Fernet, but I think the Toronto is one of the best whiskey cocktails ever, which is basically an old fashioned, but instead of bitters, you use Fernet. And I think it's delicious, but I drink Fernet on its own frequently.
That and cherry herring, right?
Oh, cherry herring, God, on its own. Whee. Can you imagine? Coffee for adults. Yay.
Creme de menthe.
Yeah, that can work. That can work well. Yeah, I can't think of a number of ingredients that I think, well, this is, I mean, even Angostura bitters, if you did La Trinidad Sour, turns out to be a delicious drink. I don't drink bitters on my own, and that's supposed to be the whole idea of, non-potable bitters. So that's unpleasant, kind of, and meant to be diluted. I don't know. That comment about creme de menthe reminded me of when I was working on my last book. I did part of those 30,000 words I needed to cut. I did a lot of research into 1920s drinking habits, like at home, because that's where a lot of people were drinking. Mm-hmm. And there was an after dinner game, when people would smoke in their homes, if you can imagine such a thing, where you'd get a little glass of creme de menthe, you fill it about 3/4 of the way, smoke, and just very gently let the smoke kind of sort of fall out of your mouth over the top of the creme de menthe to get it so it would just bulge over the edge of the glass without sort of sighing over the sides. And whoever did that won, and then everyone would drink their cigarette smoked creme de menthe. Very classy. We should bring that back.
Very.
We're getting comments now. Andy Littman says he loves the shot of Angostura.
See?
I'm pretty sure creme de menthe is equal to mouthwash.
Depends on the brand. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, some of it's pretty bad.
Egg
So
white.
is that the mentholated
Oh, okay. Egg whites.
men?
That's a good one.
Yeah, egg whites are
Oh, egg whites.
there are two ways of dealing with egg whites that I found. One is mix them up before service, so that sort of that funky barnyard hay sort of smell dissipates. And the other one is to mix it with black pepper or some essential oils like a black oil or shishito essential oil, and that might work. But otherwise, yeah, miss me with the egg whites. I don't use them at home.
I don't either because I'm allergic to eggs, so I have to go away from them in stores and everything. So it's if I'm at an event and the bartender is making these cocktails with somebody's whiskey, I've got to ask. I know you don't want to tell me the recipe, but you got to tell me if there's egg whites in there. I can't touch this, or I'm going to be sick the rest of the night.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's come back to bite me a couple of times when they wouldn't tell me. And I just learned if they won't tell me what's in it, I don't touch it.
Yeah, that's safe.
So we've gone a little over an hour now. Any final thoughts from any of you? Any parting words of wisdom for the audience out there?
Oh my God.
Support your local bartenders. Times are tough.
Yeah. Your local bartenders and your local distilleries too.
Yeah, without bartenders, whiskey, booze has a much smaller reach. So think about how many spirits you've heard about because of your bartender, and most of us are out of work right now. So
yeah,
shameless plug.
Shameless plug, yes.
And put your ear to the ground about what's happening on your local scene. I mean, maybe there are bartenders who maybe it's a little black market, but you might get cocktails delivered to your home. Yeah, is it breaking laws? If it's saving people's jobs and helping them make a living, and keeping this tradition of bartending, this craft alive and active, yeah, we don't want to have another interruption like Prohibition was, where the whole knowledge just fades away. I don't think we're going to get there, but let's double down and make sure that doesn't happen again.
Mm-hmm.
Nafeesa, we didn't even get a chance to really talk to you about shoes and booze. Tell me about that blog.
Well, I combined two of my favorite things. So I grew up loving shoes, and when it became legal, I decided I liked cocktails. And I grew from taking whatever the sweetest thing at the bar was to actually learning stories and tasting through things. One day I was sitting home and I was like, I'm going to write about something. What do I want? And my two favorite things happened to rhyme. So there's shoes and booze. And what I also realized is that very often people judge you by what you drink, right? So you go to a bar, you place an order. The people sitting around you at the bar kind of get an idea of how to approach you or who they think you are based on what you have sitting in front of you. If you're a single woman and, out cruising for guys, that's it. If you're a guy looking for girls, like, it's just, there's a whole dynamic to it and a whole nuance to it, as well as your shoes. Like, you have the memes that say, I make shoe contact before eye contact. That often is true. Like, people look at your shoes and size you up. And so it became, if you're this woman in this mood, you wear these shoes and drink these drinks. And so the shoes get paired with the cocktail kind of based on what these shoes evoke and also what this cocktail evokes, And then I started playing around with colors and, this is a bow. Bows go with cocktails that taste like this. Maybe it's more sweet. It's challenging now because there's this big conversation about gendered drinks and gendered cocktails. And you don't want to call something feminine, or you don't want to say this is, it looks like you drink with the boys when you drink this. But in 2008, when it started, that's kind of how you could speak. And that's how I felt as like a mid 20 something writing. So now my challenge has been, how do I have shoes and booze in the world we live in today? And that's why you don't see as much writing on shoes and booze as you used to, because I've had to reckon with that and just all, some of the other issues that have been around our industry. I saw another episode, Mark, where you talked about race in the industry and different things like that. So I started having these crises of conscience, and shoes and booze has kind of been put on pause as I explore ways that feel right for me to come back to bringing those things together.
But why would you do that? Because it's an expression of what you are. Why should you set that aside to somebody else's standards? Do your own damn thing. Go for it.
But I've also been evolving myself. Like, I've looked at the way people talk and the requests that people make, and I say, if as a Black woman, I want other people to reconsider the way they speak and the way they do things, then I need to kind of start considering this for other people. And you go, well, now that you look at it, like, I always wondered why I had to be like, Nafeesa drinks like an old white man because I like whiskey. And it's like, that shouldn't be the thought that we have. It should just be like, Nafeesa likes whiskey. And so in thinking that way, it's finding, like as the brand writer that I am, you want to do these little puns and you want to do these fun things. And then you have to sit and think, or I have to sit and think. I can't say what someone else has to do, but I sit and think and go, does that reflect the human that you are right now? Or does that reflect someone who didn't know better before?
Well, as
no
one
matter
of the
how cute it
guys
sounds.
in the room, there's room for everybody.
There is. No, exactly. Like when I started Shoes and Booze, I would be at these whiskey lunches and I was not only the only woman, but also the only Black person in, at a lot of these lunches in New York. And a lot of the guys, these good old boys, would be surprised when I knew what I was talking about. And so it was kind of cool because like you would see the eyebrows raise and then people come over and talk to me and be like, let's talk some more. I want to know. And, but right. So Shoes and Booze, the initial was you're, in this mood. And then it became thing where it was like, you know what? A lot of women don't know. Outside of our industry, a lot of women have not taken the time to know. And they've kind of thought it was a bad thing. Like people will judge me. They think I'm a drunk. They'll think I'm a lush if I know too much about liquor or if I'm drinking something that's not considered soft. And so I started trying to educate people. Like I do Tipsy Tuesdays. And it's like, here's some background on rum. Here's some things you should know. And like I said, I'm just working on how to evolve that based on the perspective I have on the world, on life, on booze, on cocktails now.
I just want to say that you're so awesome.
Thank you.
Said is so awesome. And so
Thank you.
And my bartenders are so weeded, and I have to go upstairs because we're making cocktails, and people are in shoes. So I have to go. So I'm down to the But
all right.
Ivy, thank you for joining us. We'll let you go, and we'll say goodbye to everybody else here in just a second. But thank you for joining us, Ivy. And
I'm sorry about the
I'm going to come find you on your book. I'm going to find your book. I'm going to order it.
Thank you.
Seconded.
Thank you.
I'll be up there as soon as I can, as soon as we can all do it again. But and Nafeesa, I owe you an apology.
Why?
For the photo that we ran a few weeks ago. You should publicly apologize for this.
No, it's fine.
I did an interview with Samara Rivers from the Black Bourbon Society. We're talking about
I love her. Yeah.
in all this.
Yeah.
I'm going through my image archives because I'd already used before all the photo that I had of Samara from the one time that we'd met in person. And I found this photo of you and Lincoln Chinnery, another good friend, at a Bullet Bourbon event sitting at the bar drinking bourbon. And I went ahead and used that as the image to illustrate this story that we did with Samara on Black Bourbon Society. And
I'm in the Black Bourbon Society.
but it was not the most flattering photo of you. The expression on your face looked like somebody put a jalapeno pepper into your bourbon.
That.
And I didn't do that with you ahead of time. And it was my attempt to do the right thing and with all good intentions, but I screwed up and I used that picture of you that was not a flattering one. And I apologize.
At least you didn't tag me. So it's like, it's not like someone could go click and, it's not like, look at this chick.
What the hell did he do?
But I looked at it and I was like, so here's the funny part. That happens. I make a lot of expressions. So I try to be mindful at events to not get caught making those faces. But if I'm in conversation, I'm going to make weird faces. And sometimes even in like screen caps of like video, things like this, I try to be mindful because I'm very expressive with my face. And it's easy to catch me making an unflattering face. But that's also like an industry thing too. Like not to even be funny, but a lot of times people will catch Black folks making these weird faces and post it like this person's great. And we're looking at it like, you think that's pretty? That's not pretty. That's not how a person should look. And it's just like, but I don't see what's wrong with it. And I'm like, oh, no. So I appreciate that you apologize.
But this was not one of
No, I
those
know.
looks. This was
No,
just
I know, this wasn't.
you had your face scrunched up. This was one of
It
these.
was.
Like,
Right, because I make these weird faces when I
something good
talk.
in this.
Yeah. No.
That's me. I'm always making weird faces.
Yeah.
If a photographer is near me, I'm always gonna make the worst face imaginable.
And the way we look on camera anyway.
No. And that's the other thing. But no, I appreciate you apologizing. But I don't hold it against you at all. I wasn't even technically upset. I was just like, oh my God, thank God I'm not tagged. Like,
and please, everybody note, I did take it down within about 12 hours. I did it on Sunday night trying to get the show out, and by Monday at noon, I took it down because I'm like, no, that wasn't the best picture to put up.
You took it out as soon. I believe you took it down as soon as I said something. I feel like I said something, and within an hour,
by midday, and I took it down immediately.
Yeah. So it's fine.
Like I said, I was trying to do the right thing, but
oh, yeah,
it wasn't the most flattering picture, and I apologize.
It's okay. I appreciate that.
Well, guys, we've gone an hour and 15 minutes.
Okay.
Any final thoughts? Anything you want to share?
You guys covered it all. Buy your book.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that coming out. So I have 2 new books to look out for.
And as Billy points out, he has an excellent screen cap of last week's live stream. Oh yeah, I can just imagine what that looks like. Okay, well, Prairie, tell us about your podcast real quickly so folks can find it.
Sure. Yeah, I have a podcast called the Bit by a Fox podcast. It's an extension of a blog I started in 2013 called the Bit by Fox blog, and it's about cocktails and cocktail culture and spirits, and the podcast is an extension of that, and it's a little broader. So I talk to people, winemakers, and brewers, master distillers, people that shape the way that we drink from around the world. And you can find me on everything is Bit by a Fox. So Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and the podcast and my blog are all Bit by a Fox.
Brand consistency. I love it. Matthew, what are you working on where people can find your stuff?
Well, I'm most active these days on Twitter. I'm also on Instagram. So Twitter, I'm MB Rowley. And I got to thank you because you're one of the very few people that pronounces that name right. I get Rowley all the time, but it's Rowley. On Instagram, I'm Rowley Writes. I've been doing a lot of editing of other people's writing these days, so keeping a low profile on my own writing, but there's something in the works. It's just not quite ready yet. So keep an eye out for that.
And your books are available through Amazon and
from Amazon, from Kitchen Arts and Letters in New York, from Omnivore Books in San Francisco, from Octavia Books sometimes in New Orleans. My last one was a finalist for the James Beard Award called The Lost Recipes of Prohibition, and it was thank you. That was based on the notebook that a chef in Philadelphia gave me. There was a handwritten 1920s Harlem doctors, physicians, his secret booze recipes. And some of them are just about as awful as you would think 1920s secret booze recipes are, but they draw a lot from German traditions and English and American. And so it was in German and English and Latin, and I had to do all the translating and explain, like, what is this? Why is this worth knowing? And that was the book that nearly killed me, but it's out now, so you can get it if you want.
I'll have to go find these things because, like I said, I think it's cool when you have friends who will go on their whatever account and like post a picture of it, or like Lincoln likes to post pictures from his cocktail book library. I just think that that's a fun thing to see, a fun thing to share, and like it's like you said, it's helpful to your booze writers and your bartender friends.
You know, this something about a booze library reminded me. Obviously, we're not doing it now because, as we were talking about earlier, events and getting together is very different right now. I have a culinary library. It's food and drinks. It's about 7,000. It's not. It's about 3,000 volumes. A little heavy. And I keep it open for people in the industry, for journalists, for distillers, for bartenders, for students. I don't lend books, but if anyone's in San Diego and when it's safe again. If you want to do some research on old historic recipes, I've got the library spans about 3 centuries and mostly English, but German, Spanish, Italian, Dutch.
Cool.
It's here, and if people want to use it, hit me up. You can find me mbrowley@gmail, and I try to be good about answering emails. So when we're visiting again, hit me up. That library's doing no good if it's just for me. So
one of the cool things about the Prohibition era, being here in the Philadelphia area, is that they're now going through and tearing out all these old row houses that were staples back then. And one of we've been doing some work with Philly Reclaim, which is a nonprofit where they take folks who are coming out of jail and other programs and teach them construction techniques by deconstructing these row houses. Mm-hmm. And every once in a while, we get a phone call from Greg, the guy that runs the place, saying, can you come over here and look at some stuff? Because we think we stepped into an old bootlegger's.
I knew exactly where this was going.
Into an old bootlegger's place. And we found stuff like vintage, original, old Overholt rye boxes that they used to mask stuff. The chemicals that they used to try to make stuff look and taste like booze, the old 3-in-1 stuff.
Right.
And things like that, and bottles of it that still exist. That we found this stuff hidden in walls and between in false floors and stuff like that all over the place in Philly.
When I lived in South Philly, I was a few doors down from Termini Brothers Bakery, and I lived between 2 octogenarians. These ladies had known each other their entire lives, and they hated each other. Could not stand. One of them actually was like, the other one's crazy. And the other one just wouldn't shut up. But the one I liked was salty mouth, swore like a sailor. And I was working on my moonshine book at the time, and she said, yeah, we used to make moonshine. And I take some of those stories with a bit of salt. I want to hear more. But the more she spoke, the more I realized, oh, no, she knows exactly what she was doing. So I asked her, what happened to the still, to the stuff? She said, oh, we buried it in the backyard. Like, you mean you've got a Prohibition-era copper still buried probably 20 feet from my back door? I didn't dig up her yard, but I was really tempted to. There's a lot of that still in Philly in the row houses.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So we get those calls. I mean, they at one point had, because they were collecting all these old Prohibition prescriptions from the doctors for medicinal whiskey, and they had a stack of them this thick. And I've got a couple of them framed now that we got, but they were selling them for like $5 each.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Historic medicinal prescriptions in mint condition.
You know, the Mutter Museum, I used to do work with them. It was the reason I moved to Philadelphia was to work at the Mutter at the College of Physicians. If some of those you come across in the future, they might want some for their collection, just if you're looking for a home where they'll be cared for.
The prescriptions, they have like a stack of them. They sell them for like $5. I've got like 3 or 4 of them, but that's about all I had room for. But yeah, we'll pass the word along because, well, the Mutter has all sorts of fun stuff. This would not be the weirdest thing in that collection.
No. A tattoo collection, plenty of skulls. This is a show in and of itself. That's my other former life as a museum curator.
It's dinner time for some folks. We don't want to get into all this.
Okay.
Well, we've pretty much killed everybody's evening for the night right now. I want to thank our guest, Ivy Mix earlier, Nafeesa Saboor at the shoesbooze.blog. You can find her at Shoes N Booze. Matthew Rowley, you can find him at matthew-rowley.com and not MB Rowley on Twitter. And Prairie Rose at Bit by a Fox on Twitter and bitbyafox.com and the bitbyafox.com podcast. And just type in Bit by a Fox. It'll come up with Prairie's picture.
Choose the letter N, booze. Should come up with me anywhere you put it.
So, hey, thank you guys for doing this. It's been great to have you. We'll have you back on again sometime soon. And once again, thanks to Ivy Mix, who had to leave us a few minutes ago, for joining us as well. Stand by, gang. Just a quick note on next week, we will have Stuart and Jennifer Nickerson. Now, if you're familiar with Scotch whiskey, you know Stuart Nickerson. He's been a distiller for many, many years, and his daughter has gone into the business now. Jennifer and her husband own the Tipperary Farm Distillery in Ireland, and they're going to join us on the next Whiskey Wednesday webcast. Don't forget Sean Josephs of Pinhook Bourbon. He used to own Char No. 4, the bar in Brooklyn, and is now in the South, in New Orleans as well. He'll be joining us to talk about making the transition from bartending to being a bourbon maker and a bourbon bottler. Once again, be safe, gang. Wear your masks when you're out in public. Have a great week, and we will see you next time on the Happy Hour webcast from WhiskyCast. I'm Mark Gillespie. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
No.